This meeting is being recorded.
Yeah, let's do a little quick round of introductions. Absolutely. Because I think most of us know each other, but I think maybe see some new faces. Anyways, I'm Peter. I'm the chair, Peter Danforth from Lamoille County Conservation District. Dean, go ahead.
Oh, sure. Yeah, and I will work from my list if that's okay.
Okay, go for it.
Yeah, Dean Pierce, staff. Why don't you go, Sarah Gratz?
Hi, I'm Sarah. I'm the AmeriCorps serving at Northwest Regional Planning Commission.
Brad?
Yes, Brad Holden, Underhill Town Administrator, representing the Chittenden County Regional Planning Commission.
Dick Goff?
I'm Dick Goff from the Lamoille County Planning Commission.
Aaron?
I am Erin DeVries from Vermont River Conservancy.
Jed?
I'm Jed Pfeffer. I'm from the Stewards of the Greensboro Watershed.
Okay, now my list is bouncing around here. Catherine, did I call you yet?
You haven't. Catherine Sonic. I'm from the town of Essex, and I'm a municipal alternate.
Ken?
Kent Henderson, Friends of Northern Lake Champlain, I'm a voting member.
Okay, thank you, Kent. And now Ken?
Good morning, Ken Mink, Georgia Conservation Commission.
Adelaide?
Good morning, Adelaide Dunn, Winooski Natural Resources Conservation District.
I think I have two more. Megan?
Morning, Megan Rodier, Lamoille County Planning Commission, and I'm an alternate.
And I believe Mel is the final person who's signed on since.
Hi, I'm Mel. I use she, her pronouns. I'm the Natural Resources Planner with the Franklin County NRCD, and I'm an alternate.
Okay, I believe that covers it, Peter.
All right, well, let's move on then. Let's bring the meeting to order like we already have, but let's make it official. Let's look at the agenda, I guess. Is that next?
Yes. Can everybody see that?
Or we could go over the protocols. Yeah, let me do that. Okay, Zoom norms. Let's go over this real quick. Introductions of all participants, which just happened. As possible, book members should have in their Zoom name title followed by voting or alternate and pronouns if desired. Book members are expected to have cameras turned on during the entirety of the meeting as technically possible. Book members are expected to stay focused, avoid multitasking, and follow the guidance of if you wouldn't do something in an in-person meeting, don't do it in a virtual meeting. Book members will use the raise hand function on Zoom to indicate request to speak. Come off mute. This is an effort to make sure all are heard in turn. All members will stay muted until called upon. If needed, Quest staff may mute participants to avoid background noise. And any comments made in the chat will be read aloud at the appropriate time by the QUISP staff in full for the public record. All right. So, agenda, does anyone have any additions, comments, anything they want to add to this? Or edit? Do I hear a motion to approve the agenda for today?
This is Erin. I make a motion to approve the agenda for January 25th, 2024.
Okay, thank you, Erin. Do I hear a second?
I second it.
All right, thank you, Jed. So all in favor of moving the agenda forward, say aye.
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 All opposed, say nay. All right, the ayes have it. Okay, minutes from last meeting. 17th, 2023. Guess I'll give people a moment to look at this. they haven't already. Edits. All right, do I hear a motion to approve the minutes from November 17th, 2023?
I move to approve the minutes of November 17th, 2023.
Thank you, Dick. Do I hear a second? That's Kent. I'm assuming that raised hand is for that.
That is correct.
Okay, all in favor of approving the minutes from November 17th, 2023, say aye.
Aye.
All opposed, say nay. Any abstentions?
Brad Holden, abstain.
Okay. Brad's abstaining. All right, the ayes have it. The minutes are approved. Public comment. Do we have public comment today? I can't recall from the introductions if there was someone from the public or just alternates, and I think there was one maybe. Okay.
Peter,
go ahead.
Sorry. Yeah, one thing I'll mention now, for lack of any better time, I guess, is just drawing attention to the fact that Bruce Wheeler, a municipal rep in the past, has submitted his resignation. That was something I think I mentioned in the email.
Oh, yeah.
So we are on the lookout for a new municipal representative, ideally someone from Lamoille County or parts upstream. We have representatives on the southern part of the basin, but we are looking to be finding someone in the middle or upper section. Excuse me. So I just thought I would mention that, and we thank Bruce for the time that he spent with us.
Well, we have some new blood up here, so maybe we can trick them into doing it. They're Hyde Park and Johnson both have new town administrators. And I think the guy from Hyde Park's from Texas. So it could have a little accent that we would enjoy here. I'll check on it. Okay, anyways, public comments. I'm not hearing any, so seeing if any new reps or alternates as needed.
I don't believe so at this time.
Okay. Policy on budget adjustments. Take it away, Dean, I guess.
Thank you. I'm going to just mute myself for a second here while I clear my throat. Okay, sorry about that. The meeting packets for today had a staff note or a brief staff memo in it, and material relating to 3 alternatives that were discussed at the last meeting. The background is that some of the basin councils have been considering adopting policies that would make it quicker for folks who've received approved funding to get adjustments to their budgets. The policies would basically set limits. An increase by a certain amount could be approved by staff. An increase by a larger amount could be approved by the staff plus the chair and vice chair, or 2 others if they are conflicted. And then beyond a certain amount of funding, the approval would need to come from the Basin Council. And again, the idea is to make the process for amending budgets quicker, perhaps simpler. And some of the driver for this is things like unexpected requirements having to do with cultural resource assessments and the like. And anyway, this was presented at the last meeting. There were some options. People seemed to like the idea, but wanted more time to reflect on, to consider those options. And so that's what we're doing today. I included in the packets actual policy language. So it's taking those concepts and putting them in the language of the policy. If the group was ready to do that. the final bullet on this slide says info from Basin 6. I just was going to share that Basin 5 has adopted a policy of this sort. Basin 6 has as well, after some discussion, but we haven't put the final touches on it. And I can share more information about what they did in a minute. But essentially, the three options that we've talked about have a baseline one, 10% for staff, between 10 and 20% staff plus the chair and vice chair, and 20% and over. What the group had thought about as alternatives were to have some caps. So we have some versions that have caps. I trust that you've seen that material before. So unless there are questions, here's a slide that puts it all out. What I will say is that the Basin 6 Council seemed to support as much leeway being given as possible. And by that, I mean the caps were actually increased from what I had proposed to them, which was similar or the same as what I had proposed to you. And so what they had ended up adopting was, whoops, I think I have that in the packets. What was adopted by the Basin 6 Council, as you can see at the top of this slide here, was up to for assessment or identification projects. So early stage projects, 10%, but capped at 10,000. For if it was up to 20,000, it would require the chair and vice chair. And if it's over 20,000, it would go to the BWIC. For design or implementation projects, so in other words, later stage projects, when the cost is less than the 50,000, 150,000, the caps are 20,000 and 40,000. And then for even larger final design or implementation projects, the caps are even higher. And what ended up happening with the Basin 6 Council was that the numbers that I had suggested as a starting point were doubled. So they just felt like the caps should be bigger. What I had understood was that the group was settled on looking at these three, but I just wanted to share what had happened in Basin 6 so that you had it as a reference point. I think that it really just comes down to this: what approach is preferred, and if you can, as a group, settle on what the approach would be, then are you ready to look at one of the policy versions and take some action on it? And I see that Dick has raised his hand, so maybe Peter, you want to take it from here.
Yeah, go ahead, Dick.
So just more of a legalistic question. Who has financial responsibility? Does the Basin Council have responsibility, or does the CWSP have financial responsibility?
I'm going to say it's the QUISP, the Clean Water Service Provider, that has the ultimate responsibility. We're the body that has the contract with DEC regarding what are called the formula funds, and that the part that the Basin Council is playing is in prioritizing projects when they come in as applications and determining whether or not a project is good enough to be funded. But once that decision has been made, once the green light has been given by the council, it's back in the hands of the QUISP to handle all the administration of, and like I said, we are responsible for. So hopefully that answers it.
Yeah, that answers my question, and leads me to the idea of saying, yeah, we should turn over some of these decisions to the QUISP and not get too involved in, is it 50,000 or 10,000? And that's their financial responsibility more than it is ours.
Dick, are you saying maybe is there no rules required, or are you just saying that go with one of these models and?
I'm saying go with the simplest model, the first one, and just realize that they have the financial responsibility, and if they see that some money needs to be added to it, they should be able to deal with it and inform us. We should know about it, and that's what these all lay out. And I'm not sure it matters which one of these, but just pick one.
Yeah, the thing that I would say that is a qualification is that the Act 76 rule says that money can't be spent without the Basin Council having considered it. So that's the I guess the footnote or the clarification or qualification. There is very much a requirement that the Basin Councils have a say in adjudging a project. And so this policy, when it was first proposed in Basin 5, was seen as a way for the council, by adopting the policy, to be taking action on spending of project funds. And so it's not like I, as a QUISP staff, could do anything other than exactly what the policy allowed. So if the policy is up to 10%, just plain 10%, no caps or anything, that is exactly what we'll follow, because we have to have a line back to an action of the Basin Council that says a certain thing can be done. Hopefully that's clear. I'm not sure.
And you were next. Can you hear me, Ken?
Yeah, you're you're coming in and out, but obviously, if you're going to increase the dollars in the grant, that affects the P numbers, right? So, I mean, I don't have any problem with the 10% thing, but just be advised that it's going to affect your effectiveness of P as far as dollars are concerned.
Yes, indeed. I still think, yeah, simple model would be good to go by, though. Jed?
Yeah, I just wondered, so is it always an increase, or is there some instances where the project would be less than what it had projected?
Go ahead.
Yeah, it's certainly possible. And in that case, there would be an allocated amount, and some portion of it wouldn't be used. And then when the project is completed, those unused monies would be back in the pool to be drawn from again. So it's I think it's unlikely that someone would come in and request that the budget be reduced, and that's because these expenses are paid on a reimbursed basis. It's not like when the amount is approved, we send the whole amount to them and it's sitting in their bank account and they would want to do an amendment to send some of it back. It's only reimbursed as they spend it. So there really is less of an urgency or a need to do a downward adjustment, but there is a need if the amount is going up.
Does anyone feel strongly about any of these models and would like to maybe consider pushing one forward today? Aaron, I think was first.
Sure. Looking at all of these models, I think I really like alternative 3. There's a lot more like detail to it. And although we've been talking about keeping it simple and kind of relying on the QUISP and folks in Dean's office to make the decisions, it still, provides opportunity for you, Peter, or the vice chair to weigh in on changes that are a high value. I mean, we can always increase that number, Dean, for, I'm looking at alternative 3, like for the design and implementation projects, which I think for both of those categories of cost of $150,000 or more, that's where I see project budgets changing. Probably less so in the project development phase. So,
Yep.
I think that's where if it's 10,000, okay, you can just approve it. But then if it's more, Peter comes in with the vice chair. And then if it's a lot more than that, then we have an opportunity to look at the P cost effectiveness in that increase. So I really like the alternative 3. It just provides a lot of detail and still gives us opportunities, but puts a lot on the QUISP and Dean's office to bring things forward to us when appropriate.
Yeah, I agree 100% with you there, Aaron, myself. Jed, I don't know if your hand was still up or if Kent was next.
Well, it's either way, it was up, but I
Okay,
can
all right.
wait. Should I go ahead or?
Go ahead, I guess.
Okay. No, I didn't look carefully like Aaron just did, but I just thought about proportions, like that those caps are proportional to the, the amount that's of the project itself, I guess. That and that's all. Just that there's that leeway, and it's it's a fair proportion, I guess. But I do like the idea of all the different checks and balances in terms of going through the projects themselves. I'm not sure for some reason the upper caps seem better, but I don't know why. I mean, I was just thinking of proportionality. Oh.
Thanks, Jed. Kent?
Yeah, I just wanted to agree with Aaron and just lend a comment from the standpoint of a group that's administering QUISP projects in the other 2 basins where this discussion has already occurred. And what we're finding is we're working right beside water bodies, and we're running into these historical assessments, these geological assessments that are coming along. And this came about after we had made our applications, and it's happening at a different time in the process than it has happened in the past. So we're adjusting. And what's happening is these are turning into, if you have to do a phase 1, you're looking at an extra $10, $15, $20,000, and it's going to delay your project anywhere from 6 to 9 months. We were notified in August that that we were going to have to do this. It wasn't until November that we got an answer that yeah, okay, we'll be out next spring. So this is a delay, and what we're hoping is that by having option 3 in place, that it'll be one thing that'll help to make this process as streamlined as it can be. So these are the sorts of situations we're dealing with, and that the provider is going to be dealing with, and the implementer is going to be dealing with. So I think number 3 more accurately describes the hands-on situation.
And to be clear, number 3 is the Basin 6 model, right?
Yes, I hope so.
Yeah, well, option 3 is actually the Basin 6 model before they doubled. So in making their approval, they doubled the caps. So I'm just going to return this. So they were looking at what we see here, but they decided that the caps should be doubled. So where it's 10,000, it's 20,000, where it's 20,000, it's 40,000, and where it's 30,000, it's 60,000. And so that's why I had included
Right.
this version here, because their numbers were doubled.
Thanks for clarifying. Aaron.
Thinking about what Kent just said, I wonder if we also want to increase our cap numbers if we are going to go with alternative 3. I can't remember, the projects that have come in, and if we've had any, Dean, where they've had to revise the budget up to, $60,000 and changes, but that definitely $60,000 is quite a bit of changes. So it's probably, we probably have less projects that would be at that cap, but then it would include projects that are at that $30,000 to $60,000 range. Do you know what I mean? Instead of having that final cap, where right now it's 30,000, maybe we double it and just kind of model it off of Basin 5, I think you said, or 6. My 2 cents.
Yeah, we haven't had experience beyond much smaller requests. We haven't had a big construction project that has signaled. However, there is a project that I am aware of that is in the Memphremagog Basin, where they had a very significant increase that I think had to do with some hazardous materials or something like that. And someone who works in that basin was part of the Missisquoi meeting, and I think it was one of the factors that had him suggesting larger numbers. But in the Lamoille Basin, no, we haven't had any experience. I think part of the reason that councils are adopting these is in anticipation, because you want to be ahead of the game and not slow the project down.
Yeah, I guess I would say similar to like what Aaron was saying, if we go with this alternate 3 proposal, I would want to see the initial caps under the design and implementation increased. And that's really based on actual experience in Lamoille County. I'm getting inching closer with partners to, as Peter knows, to implementing 2 projects in Wolcott that are more restoration based. So, but one thing I will note that did increase the design costs, the final design cost, was all the flooding we had and the need to go back and do more, site visits and more on-site, surveying and evaluation as part of a post-flood analysis. So we saw that with, for example, the floodplain restoration project up at the North Wolcott Recreation Fields. There was just so much debris and damage from the July flood that the engineering team had to send their team back out in the field and really reevaluate the site. So that did increase, I'm just looking at these numbers, that did increase the design cost by like 15,000. So there's just an example there of, another reason why design costs might go up. And I guess I would say for implementation, similar there, we've just seen the cost certainly go up more than, 15,000 when they're actually finalizing the final cost estimate for construction.
Peter, I think you're muted if you were speaking.
Sorry. Yeah, I agree, Megan. And with inflation last year too, I saw things increase really quite a bit. So you never know what's going to happen. And I think to make it easier to make these modifications, but also have a groundwork, you know, or a sort of template to work from would be good. So I'm assuming, Dean, we probably want to try to make this actionable item today. Is that what we're trying to go for?
Only if the
Yeah.
group is ready to do that.
Jed, though, has a comment.
Yeah, so I was just trying to understand what Megan was saying. Is she saying that we would increase the design and implementation and the, I'm sorry, the design part and then the implementation part on top of what is already set in alternate 3, or just keep them as is? That's all.
Yeah, I was looking more at like the, you know, the first one where it says 10% the absolute value of 10,000 for design, and then, you know, under implementation it says 10% with absolute value of 15,000. I guess I was looking at the first tier under those two. And just trying to provide more flexibility, you know, like Dick said earlier, for the Quist staff to keep things moving along.
I might be a little bit confused now. So does it come down to being an adjustment to option 3 or option 3?
It would, I mean, if you were to adjust those, your first bullet points under final design and the implementation categories, if you were to up those absolute categories, is what I'm saying. Or you could just keep the way it is, but then we'll, you know, we'll have to go back to the Basin Council, basically.
All right. I think Jed, you were, and then Aaron. You're muted, Jed.
No, I mean, I thought that, you know, doubling these choice 3, you know, from 10 to 20, from 20 to 40, and from 30 to 60 was adequate. I mean, you know, so I thought we were talking about this particular choice right here, the third option with the increase.
Megan, is that correct, or more or less we're going with, or were you talking about a different model?
Yeah, no, that's more or less what I was going with. Sorry, I have the alternate 3 version from the packet right in front of me.
Okay.
Yes, what you have up in front of you that includes the increases is what I was suggesting.
So
Aaron?
Yeah, I think I was just gonna follow up on what Megan and Jed were saying about, like, just increase that. I have the packet in front of me too, like there's 3 bullets in each of the headings, and just increase those. Sounds like we're coming up with like alternative 3 with amendments by just increasing the 3rd bullet there to 20, 40, and 60.
Yeah. And Jed, are you still, your hand's still up for more comment, or?
when people are saying bullets, I just want to make sure we are talking. So this is alternative 3 with the bullets. Is this what people are referring to? Just to be sure.
Yes.
That's what I was looking at.
Okay. And the numbers that are going to be changed on this are going to be, I'm sorry to just, I don't want this to be fumbled. But in the design implementation category of less than 150, are we going to start there, or is it only more than 150?
I think we were talking about each of the, so you have 4 assessment, identification, development projects for design projects with less than 150 and more than 150, increase, this is what I heard, and sorry, Peter, I just jumped in, but what I heard is that third bullet in each of the categories, increase it. So if you go up to for assessment, identification, development projects, there's the third bullet, increase that to 20. And then the third bullet in the next category, increase that to 40.
Yep.
And then the third bullet in the last category, increased it to 60.
Okay,
That's what I understood.
okay, and
That's
that
what I
is, that is adopting the same as Missisquoi. That's effectively, that's this version, because those numbers have been changed to 20,
Yep.
40, and 60. So yeah, that's what I thought people were saying, but they weren't saying use that set. And okay, now I think we're on the same page.
All right. And now I have I know Dick and then Brad.
So I just want to understand one aspect of this. By making this policy adjustment, it does not require that the SWISP increase these budgets if they're asked for. It's still the judgment of the QUISP to make a decision of whether or not to approve these additions.
Yes, that is correct. So if someone came in the door with a request that was just really baseless, the staff is not obligated to give them that increase. This is simply saying that if the judgment has made that it is a necessary increase, it could be done expeditiously, but it's not. We have had some discussions internally, and we're of the view that it's not a mandate. It is not a free pass. It just means that the process can happen more quickly. And so someone might come in and say, I need $20,000 or $10,000 more. And we say, well, wait a second, did you consider this? And oh, maybe there's a solution that's 3,000, and that's what the adjustment would be. But it's not an automatic to the max increase. Because
thank you. I wanted that to be clear.
Yeah, and as Ken had said, we're mindful of what the implications of these would have on the phosphorus reduction ratio. So yeah, we don't want to see the numbers climb when they don't need to climb.
Brad?
Yes, I think we're probably at the point of putting a motion on the floor. And I would move to approve option 3 with the amendments that Aaron put out. And I feel like I totally understand like what Kent was talking about, and some of the last minute, the flood event that changed existing conditions, historical assessments, all that sort of thing. And it seems to be a warranted policy.
Okay, so Brad, I hear you're making a motion to adopt option 3 with the assumed modifications.
Yeah, I could go down the line and be changing, right? 5 to 10, 10 to 20, and 20 to 40. Is that right?
30 to 60.
30 to
Maybe I've got
60.
that wrong. 60, yes.
Yeah. All right. Do I hear a motion to approve, adopt budget adjustments option 3 with the doubling the caps? Do I hear a second?
A second, this is Aaron.
Aaron DeVries, you second that motion. Any more comments before we move forward on the vote? Okay. All in favor of adopting budget adjustments option 3, say aye.
Aye.
Okay.
All opposed, say nay. Any abstentions? All right, the ayes have it. I'm gonna go modify my budget now. $20,000, yeah. All right. What's next? Input on cost effectiveness.
Yes, this scintillating topic is brought to you by DEC. And speaking of DEC, I did see that Karen Bates joined the meeting after we did our introduction, so minutes will show that Karen is here as well.
Hi, Karen.
The meeting packets, as this slide shows, indicated a note providing a little bit of an explanation about why this is being discussed. Essentially, a request has come from a different member of DEC staff, not from Karen, asking each of the basin councils to consider the question, is there a point when the cost of reducing phosphorus on a kilogram basis becomes too much? That's the request, is like, what is there a number and what is that number? I included in the packets a table that is now getting to be a few years old on with information about the cost of different types of projects. It's somewhat dated information, but it's the best information that we've had that shows kind of sort of what projects cost more than other projects. But a lot of people in the QUISP world and in the partner world have been pointing out that costs have increased since 2001 or 2021 or 2020. And so I know that some WICs have been feeling like that's the first responsibility, is we need to have some kind of increased numbers. And then another part of the meeting packet had an excerpt. I've mentioned in the past many times the DEC guidance book, I will call it. It consists of about 10 chapters. 9 of them are nearing completion, or several of them have been completed. A couple more are still nearing completion, and one more has to be written. But the guidance document has, which not for you, no surprise, it has guidance in it. And so I did an excerpt, and I know this is just a killer, but I will just say it. The guidance document says that the books in the quiz were encouraged to identify and establish, publicize, post a minimum cost effectiveness ratio. So part of the answer to the question, why is DEC asking the WICs to think about this, is that, oh, this guidance document has said that, ideally, strongly encouraged the identification of this number or a number like this. So that's part of where it's coming from. And I just wanted people to know it's not like it's not a request without any kind of basis, but it is a request that some basin councils are struggling with. And so in this list of questions that I have, they include, is the idea of a threshold a good idea? We are all working with cost effectiveness when we are evaluating projects, but we do not, as a QUISP or you as a WIC, there's not a cutoff point. And maybe that's where a threshold would end up. But is it a good idea? If so, what should it be? Or how should it be determined? And if not, why not? And my final bullet here says something about latest communications from other basins. DEC has clarified their request. They've cited this guidance, this section of guidance that says that WICs and QUISPs are strongly encouraged to come up with this number. What other basins have responded with has varied. One basin has said, no, we're not ready to do a threshold yet, and we think the focus should be on coming up with better real numbers, and then maybe we can talk. Another basin that I'm aware of has said, no, it's just too soon. We need more rounds of projects to be able to say where the cutoff point should be. And one of the basins, Basin 5, which covers the northern Lake Champlain, that basin council essentially said, look, we have a formula. If you want to understand where we think the cutoffs are, just, look at our formula. I'm hoping that can set the stage. Me blathering at you can help you just set the stage for a discussion, and whatever comes from this discussion, I will share back with DEC in response to this request. So I will stop talking now, and if there are questions, I'll try to answer them. Otherwise, I will let people discuss internally.
I'll let Jed go first.
So if the QUISP has a target, my understanding was that there's some kind of target in terms of, phosphorus reduction that is required, that somehow you have a yearly or however long it is amount of time to achieve a product in terms of reduction or a goal. Then it would seem that there should be some minimum amount of reduction that each project should project, or that's just and maybe my understanding is not clear about that. So I guess Dean, you could answer that.
Yeah, I will do my best, Jed. So using round numbers, the QUISP and the BWIC in Lamoille County, the Lamoille Basin, should be averaging, we should spend no more than $15,000 per kilogram on average when we do projects. That's the simplest way of putting it, is that all told, $15,000 per kilogram on average. But the challenge is that our funding, the funding that comes to the basin, is based on a mix. That's why this table that's in the package is kind of important, because the funding that comes to the basin assumes not just that we'll do one kind of project, it assumes that we will do some projects that cost relatively more money and some that will cost relatively less. So unless we really start to slice things even further, and so instead of saying $15,000 on average, we would set not just one threshold, but we'd set multiple thresholds for different project types. Unless we're prepared to go there, and I don't think we do, we have to kind of take a long-term view. We have to say we're going to fund a bunch of projects, and we want to try to have them average, and spending less money overall is good. So to get back to your basic question, $15,000 per kilogram is what we should do on average. So if we knew that every project was kind of the average project, we shouldn't be spending twice that amount, because that's going to spend too much. It's just that looking at any one project is difficult because it's part of a mix. We don't assume that we're only going to do one type of project, and the funding comes to the basin with the expectation we're going to fund a range of projects. The other thing that I want to mention is that part of what seems to be driving this is the fact that there are two major buckets that will exist for funding. And one of them is the formula fund, which is the money that we're talking about. And another one is, and the focus of the formula fund is on cost-effective phosphorus reduction. The other bucket is something that's called enhancement. And the focus of that is not it's not on phosphorus reduction. And so it doesn't have the baggage that the formula fund does. And an email that I got from the DEC technical project manager, who's, I think, really trying to work with the basin councils and the QUISP on this, it reveals that I think that part of what DEC is hoping for is a way to say early on, if a project costs a lot per kilogram, you will go to the enhancement pot of funds. And so this slide I have here was just the text that I clipped from an email that he had this morning. he just said, let me throw it on the table. What if DEC had a number, $100,000 per kilogram, above which all projects should go to enhancement, and those that are below that go to the QUISP? So some of what seems to be motivating this is this desire to have a number where, for people who don't know which direction to go in, having a number would tell them. Do you turn left to go to the QUISP, or do you turn right to go to the enhancements, or up or down, however you want to do it? That seems to be some of what is driving the discussion. The challenge I see, though, is that for many projects, we may not know enough to be able to even come up with an estimate. So setting a number is kind of, it doesn't really help us as much as we might want. Anyway, I'll stop.
So yeah, I had the pleasure of being on 2 councils. And Erin's laughing because she knows what I'm talking about. So there is a sort of natural tension that's now occurred. And so the QUISP, needs to spend its money and wisely. And of course, you're having a lot of proposals sent for you, and some of which aren't going to, cut the mustard as far as the phosphorus efficiency. And so we just had voted on some in our other council, and there was at least 2 that were rejected, both of which I'll get back to were developed stormwater projects. And another one, which was accepted, but it was like a 3 to 4 vote. It was created a bit of tension, and so this is why these questions are being brought up. Are we going to spend the money wisely for phosphorus reduction, right? But back to what you said, Dean, about, should you go right or left with, the enhancement or with clean water? There are some projects, and we're starting to see, and I'm getting back to develop stormwater projects that aren't going to work in either case. And thus you have these lists all throughout the state of all these stormwater projects that were created by the stormwater master plans that are not going to get funded. And so they've kind of I guess the DC accidentally shot themselves in the foot with this one by putting so much money into these stormwater master plans, and they're just not going to be, funded for the most part. A few might get through the cracks, so to speak, but that's something I'm sure they're going to be looking at. Like how are those things going to get funded, or are they? And because a lot of those projects are important, not just for phosphorus reasons, but salt and other toxic chemicals and whatnot that come with developed stormwater. And so I feel like they're going to have to create a whole new bucket or something for those projects, because anyways, I'm sort of going off on a tangent, but try to get back to the point with this this tension. I think, as you said before, most of the BWICs have realized that maybe we're about a year off before we can make any kind of benchmark. This is as low or high as you can go, because we still need to get projects in there, right? And we still need to grow and find out naturally what projects work and what don't. I would recommend to everyone that buffer plantings are an easy one, and you can get a lot of phosphorus reduction, a lot of ecological benefit. Those should just go right through. Strategic wood additions seem to be the ones that are going through as well. Wetland restorations that have those aspects of both. Those seem to be where we're naturally kind of flowing with this clean water funding. And so if you're a watershed organization or district or whatever, a planning commission, I would strongly recommend that naturally going in those directions for the fundings. That's just my 10 cents, and try to stay away from things that are just going to take up our time and ultimately be sad because you're not going to get the money in, right? So anyways, I'm done.
Dean, what are,
Or Jed, go ahead.
what are you charged with as far as phosphorus reduction for, say, 2023?
Well, it's about 40 kilograms in the Lamoille Basin, and And yeah, that may be the simplest way of describing it, but it's 40 kilograms per year. So it's really more like 40. The life of an assignment, an initial assignment of a WIC in a council it's about 5 years. So if we just simply keep it, it would be 5 years of 40 kilograms, roughly speaking. So we yeah. And that's only a portion of the total that really exists if we had all the money in the world, but we don't. And so the amount of the target has been scaled down because of it.
I think Aaron, you were next.
Thanks, Peter. I'll just add my 2 cents because I also sit on another council and this question has been brought up there as well. Just simply, I don't think at this time the QUISP and WIC, the formula grant program, Act 76, whatever we want to call ourselves as a state funding group here, is ready to come up with a cost effectiveness threshold. I think we need more projects in the door. I think the science is not perfect as to the exact amount of kilograms per phosphorus that will be reduced in every project. There's new ways in which we can reduce phosphorus through strategic woody addition or beaver dam analogs. You know, that science is new and is not perfect, and I don't even know if it's part of the FFI, which is what we need to use to calculate the phosphorus, and that's not a perfect tool yet. I would really love it if those enhancement grants, so let's say that it's $100,000 of kilograms per phosphorus project, and it goes to enhancement grants. Why not have that project, if it is funded through an enhancement grant, why not have those phosphorus credits counted in the basin in which that project is occurring? I mean, we're all working towards the same end of trying to reduce phosphorus through the TMDL into Lake Champlain. So I think the DEC needs to work more closely with the enhancement grant folks and say, hey, what projects are you doing? Hey, how much P do you have? Oh, you have a lot of P? We're giving that to the Lamoille Basin and we're crediting them so that we can get at our numbers every year, or over the next 5 years, we can do those numbers. It's all the same pot of money. Anyway, that's it for me.
Thanks, Aaron. It's a good point. Jed?
Yeah, I agree with Aaron. I mean, that seems to be a much more holistic way of looking at it, especially if, you know, these ways of determining phosphorus reduction are not all that exact. But the other part I wasn't completely clear about. So these water quality enhancement grants, I was in the process of applying for one. We decided not to do it, but it looked like the cap on that particular one was only $10,000 per project for, you know, implementation projects. So I'm assuming that these water quality restoration or water quality enhancement grants, it's just a generic term that many different agencies will organize. Is that so? I mean, this one was from Fish and Wildlife was promoting it. So I don't know. That was one question. So I guess that would be the first one.
You're probably thinking of the watershed grant that had a cap of 10,000 for implementation.
Okay,
And those applications were due early February, and I know that because I'm on the committee. So
okay, all right. So
yeah.
that's right. Yeah, and then this is sort of not completely related to this idea of, you know, having a cap or a specific minimum in terms of how much phosphorus is reduced. But I just had a question on, so there were costs associated, I wondered what the cost associated with the river corridor easement was. I was like what, what is a river corridor easement in terms of like cost? So I didn't quite understand that, but that could be brought up later. I mean, if we're trying to decide something about minimums right now.
Dean, you want to respond to any of this before?
Well, enhancements can be kind of a generic term. But we're moving towards this situation where, as long as we're talking about DEC, it's these two big buckets, and there will be a bucket that we will call enhancement. That's the first thing. When it comes to easement costs for river corridors, I'm sure Aaron can answer that question. And I think what I may do is just say Karen probably has something meaningful to add about this, and that she's maybe next up.
Yes, she is. Go ahead, Karen.
So I thought I would clarify the enhancement grant, so the purpose of enhancement grants versus the QUISP formula grants. So think about it as we've got these clean water funds, which, go to each. And the initial idea when we were developing the QUISP idea was that, okay, we need to find a way to spend this money efficiently and effectively. We can't manage all the grants ourselves. So we're going to create this entity called the QUISPs, which can not only take some of the burden off of us to be grant administrators. So they're the grant administrators. The block grant administrators are anybody from WUV to NRCDs. It's we're putting money into different groups and saying, and then we have our own that we manage, but here, help us spend this money. The QUISPs are a little bit different in that we're actually hoping that the QUISP, because we have the BWICs, they're going to find other projects that these other block grant entities might not find. So you're creating this opportunity to find more projects and therefore create more opportunities to reduce phosphorus. So it doesn't make sense for the block grants or enhancement grants to say, oh, you can take our phosphorus and it'll contribute to the QUISP target, because that's not what we wanted. We want the enhancement grants. We need them to pursue projects that reduce phosphorus, but it doesn't have to be just phosphorus. But we take that and account it and put it up in our accounting system. But then we want QUISP to find their own projects, more projects, new projects that will also contribute to the phosphorus reduction. So that's the idea. That's why I guess that's trying to address Aaron's comment. And I hope I got that right. And so the other thing to think about in terms of, well, as a project proponent, who do you apply to? If you're looking at the whole system and what we're trying to do, which is let's reduce phosphorus, but let's also help the QUISPs in their endeavors to meet a target with the money they have, that if you want to give the QUISP as much phosphorus as possible for as little money as possible. And that's going to be your thinking. So if you've got a buffer planting, take it to the QUISPs. It might be easier to do it somewhere else. But if you want this QUISP model to survive or to do well, I think it'll survive. It looks like we all have a lot of confidence in it. But if you want it to do well, and that really think about how you can help the QUISP obtain their target. So then if you have a really expensive project that might not have as much phosphorus reduction, go over to the enhancement grants, or better yet, do the design work in the enhancement grants, but then for implementation, bring it over to the QUISP. I mean, that's not really what we wanted, but or not the goal of developing the QUISP. But again, the focus is how do we help the QUISPs meet their target with the money they have?
Hey, Karen, I have a response. What you're saying makes complete sense, as far as these buckets of money. I just want to have something clarified. So there's the TMDL.
Yep.
There's the clean water service provider. There's the enhancement. There's block grants that are still like through WUV or through the NRCC that are clean water. For that matter, there's the Lake Champlain Basin federal monies going towards reduction. Are all these numbers being accounted for the TMDL, right? And that's what we're looking at ultimately. And that we're just not, and so these numbers that the QUISP are looking for are just a separate sort of box of their goals, separate from the whole TMDL, or is it?
No.
That's the semantic problem I'm having right now.
Right. So
Yeah.
it's a target we created to help meet the Lake Champlain Basin target. You know, basically saying we've got this money. We think that if we give it to this group, they can help us.
Right. The clean water bucket, the whole, not just the clean water.
Yeah. And the block grants, again, it's another way of taking a bunch of money and giving it to another entity and saying, can you help us spend this money? I mean, we have a lot more of the, I guess, requirements and the steps that are needed. You guys I have a little more freedom to create the steps or the criteria. But
and then the federal grants too that go through the same thing, are those being accounted in the DEC system or not?
Yeah, I think,
Okay.
you know, we've been working on it to get more and more. Definitely the EQIP, the agricultural money, or the money that goes to agricultural BMPs. We're counting for that, and Lake Champlain Basin program, we're working with them to grab those numbers as well.
Thanks, Karen. Adelaide?
Wowee. Thank you so much for that thorough explanation. You know, I'm sort of new to the group as a district manager and still learning a lot about how these different pots of money are distributed. And, you know, as the WNRCD representative, we are in all three basins and have a hand in a lot of these different funding sources. So it's helpful to gain that clarity. Aaron, I agree with you that we're all working towards the same goal on TMDL, and, you know, where those phosphorus credits are split. I've had some questions around how that should be organized. So I think that's helpful to hear your input on that. And Peter, thanks for the heads up on just, you know, where the best phosphorus reduction in terms of kilograms can be spent, and in terms of effectiveness. Working towards buffer plantings and the others that you mentioned seems most logical. It has been helpful for me to hear, you know, in terms of QUISP funding, which projects should go where, and then in terms of enhancement. I do think it's relatively early. And again, I'm new, so I sort of have a little bit of a fresh perspective on this, but it seems relatively early to set caps in terms of where projects should be allocated yet. But I think it is helpful to sort of, when we have more of a clear view, to have some projects funneled towards the QUISP and some funneled towards enhancement. I think that will just sort of make things a little bit more simple, if that makes sense. Thank you.
Ken?
Thank you. I'm going to present a motion that this topic be tabled. I'm going to give my reasons. I'm really appreciative of the discussion and the information that DEC is bringing. This is a conversation that we've been having since the inception of our work on the Basin Water Quality Councils. The graphs and tables that Dean presented that explains what the cost per pound of phosphorus should be based on the type of project that you are presenting. Those tables are aging, and we are collecting more information as we go along. Working on the various councils that I'm working on, I think the councils are functioning extremely well. I have seen projects declined in basins 5 and 6 because of the high cost. I had one project that was declined in basin 5 with a $23,000 number on it. There were some culvert projects up in basin 6 that were declined that were over 100,000. So I think that the councils are functioning very well. I think it's because of the great direction that we've had from both the service provider and from DEC. And I think that good work is going to continue. And for that reason, I would present a motion now to accept the advice and instruction guidance that we are getting, but that not to bring it to a final number for a cap right now, but to table it for further discussion.
Okay, Ken, I hear a motion to table this discussion till a further time. Do I hear a second?
I would second it.
All right, Jed, I hear a second on that. Dean, you have a comment or anything before we move to a vote?
It can wait until after.
Okay. All right, all in favor of tabling this discussion to a later date, please say aye.
Aye.
All opposed, say nay. Any abstentions? All right, the ayes have it. Move on. Dean?
Yeah, I hope I don't regret going off script and editorializing a little bit. Karen said something earlier about when we were creating the QUIS model or something to that effect. And I just wanted to say that there were many participants involved in that, not just DEC. And how DEC sees and how people see the QUIS model varies a lot depending on where you sit. DEC's view is its view. Many times QUIS have different views about what Act 76 and the Act 76 rule actually say. But something I do agree with Karen on was that QUIS were created to jumpstart projects. She said, find more projects. It was almost like I heard rah, rah, rah. And it's serious business that getting projects done. The editorial comment I'm making really boils down to, though, is that the system that we face does not always make it as easy or as easy as it should be. If we're in a system that means decentralizing responsibility and actually getting phosphorus reduction. So anyway, that's the editorial. DEC's got a lot of things on its plate it's trying to do, but we in the QUIS world, and I think probably some in the work world, see that the system can be complicated. And if what we are being created to do is to hit phosphorus targets and find those projects, we have to be looking for ways to make it simpler. Anyway, off my soapbox.
Thanks, Dean. I guess we'll move on to the next item.
I just had a quick question regarding AOP. Is that something that would be handled in this, what you're calling an enhancement grant?
I'll jump in, Ken, and say it might be partly because those types of projects, the ones I have seen proposed, don't have the really strong phosphorus reduction effectiveness ratios. But I don't know if Karen or anybody else has a thought on that.
Yeah, there's also grants dedicated to AOP through federal funding that often you would go through as opposed to state funding. But there is the enhancement grant and it would work for that. But as a match, usually AOP projects usually are pretty expensive. And so the feds are a good place to start, in my experience.
And if we're ready to roll along, Mr. Chair, the next item has to do with adoption of completed projects. This may not be a prolonged discussion. I'm not sure. The packets had a staff note that gave some background information. We've talked about project adoption a bit in the past. We were holding off because we knew that a chapter of this guidance document book that I mentioned earlier was being written. That chapter exists, but it's being revised. So anyway, I have included in the packets the latest version of the text that I have as it relates to project adoption. Some graphics, so hopefully show the relationships. But, you know, we were just saying moments ago, the QUISP and the WICs are in this realm where we're trying to find projects that will reduce phosphorus cost effectively. At some point along the way, somebody realized, well, wait, there are also some other projects that that were put in the ground. They exist, but maybe, and no one has claimed the phosphorus credit. So maybe we can count the phosphorus reduction for those projects also. So this idea of taking an existing project and adopting it so that we can put the phosphorus reduction benefits that project was born. You know, probably multiple people had the idea in the backs of their heads, but it was born, and DEC is crafting the guidance that they feel we need so that we can figure out how to do this. The thing I should say is that we have money as a QUISP for putting projects in the ground and counting the phosphorus benefits, but something that we aren't discussing enough probably is that we also, some of that money also is to be used on an ongoing basis to make sure that the project is maintained the way that it should be. A lot of people in this group are aware of, you know, the damage done to something by a storm. And we have to recognize that if there was a planting done and a flood ripped it out, or if there was some other project done and it wasn't maintained, it wasn't cleaned, that it's important to do that maintenance so that it continues to provide the ecological benefit that we want it to do. So it's been known for a long time that, oh, this QUISP money, it's for building things and for maintaining things. But what was less clear was that some of that money could also be used to operate and maintain some things that are already built. And so this is what I'm talking about when I talk about project adoption. It's that there could be a project that was implemented in recent times that someone would be willing to say, hey, you want to take over responsibility for maintaining it? I'm willing to do that. And you can get the phosphorus credits for it. So I'm bringing this to the council to keep the idea a little bit more in your mind. I was hopeful when we were starting this that we would be closer to the actual final language in the document, but we aren't there. This chart shows that there are a lot of players. We could have a whole meeting dedicated perhaps to this idea that you have a landowner, you have an organization that implements a project, usually working very, very closely with the landowner. There's someone who will maintain the project that's done on that landowner's land. Maybe it will be the same organization, maybe not. We are understanding, though, as part of this system that we've got, we also have to have, you know, people who inspect and verify. So that's a category of player who will be part of the operations and maintenance system. Ultimately, we have the QUISP. The QUISP have to be sure that things are taken care of, because if something is damaged or isn't maintained and it goes offline, what happens? We actually have a hold put on that phosphorus credit. So it's like it was on the books and then it gets taken off the books until that problem is solved. Anyway, I'm going off on a little bit of a tangent having to do with operations and maintenance, but the question for this group has to do with, are there projects out there in the world that you are aware of that could be adopted or considered for adoption and would be a place where QUISP dollars are spent? And if you are aware of such projects, where are they? How quickly do you think you'd be able to move on them? We have to follow a lot of protocols. So before the QUISP could adopt a project, we have to make sure that it's doing what it's supposed to. So we have to have someone go to and verify the project to make sure that it's being taken care of. I've just jumped ahead to this list of questions because I think that it's the thing that the group can and should talk about unless we want to double back on anything, because that's the opportunity is for existing projects to be a source of phosphorus reduction to help us meet that 40 kilograms per year target. It's not just funding new projects, but we are also looking at this opportunity to fund existing projects and adopt them and make them part of our system. But there's a lot of stuff that goes along. I'm going to stop and let you take over, Peter, and maybe you have a question.
Yes, yes, so there's yes to all those questions. My question to you is this sort of a reverse application process in the sense that if I say, hey, there's a project, can you adopt it? Does that mean that we're not going to be applying again like we would in a normal application process? It would be more the opposite, where you would subcontract, say, us to continue that maintenance using the maintenance money or whatever, or is it back to we're applying to you for you to adopt? You see what I'm trying to say? Is this like different? This is obviously different than the typical RFP process.
Yeah, so the rules or the guidance is still being written, and so there's a lot of discussion going on right now about how involved would this process be. So as one example, there are some people who are of the view that it's like an application for a new project, that you would file an application with a QUISP, the QUISP would take it to the BWIC, and the BWIC would take a motion, take an action on the request, and then the QUISP would follow up with whoever's proposing the adoption of the project, and we would do it that way. That's how some people are seeing it. The problem with that kind of, well, my response to that is that there's nothing in rule that says that. And so it's an entirely made up process. And there are others who have said that the QUISPs were always understood to be responsible for this operations and maintenance oversight role. And so that the process for adopting could actually be different, and it might be the partner organization or whoever wants to have a project adopted comes to the QUISP and some other process is followed, but it wouldn't necessarily be very much like the new project process. Is that helpful? Does that kind of get?
I would recommend streamlining it to that second option and make it less of this arduous application process. The BWIC would still vote, but it would be more based upon, Dean, you're working with someone, say they have a project for you to adopt, you bring it up to the meeting and say, can we adopt this? This is the amount we'll need for maintenance, but not have to go through this extraordinarily long application process. I don't think it because, as you said, you're responsible for maintenance, right? The QUISPs are, so it should be, some items should be cut from that process in order to get to that spot and not sort of prolong or protract the process. That's what I'm trying to say.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, the system that's being created is already pretty complex because, like I said, we've got the landowner, we have the partner organization that implemented it, we have maintenance performers who could be the organization or maybe the landowner in some cases, but we have verifiers, we have all kinds of, and so yes, the ways that we can simplify the process, I think, would be good, but I think maybe Adelaide has something.
Yeah, Adelaide, for sure.
Thanks. I just had a question trying to put this into like a real life lens. So say, we have a grant through Lake Champlain Basin program to, my little guy just woke up, to do all these riparian buffer planting recommendations on people's land. So they have taken the initiative per our recommendation, planted the trees, high phosphorus reduction, project. Would we be the verifiers? And we can get an O&M with them, but I'm just wondering like how this would actually work. I'm gonna mute myself for just 1 minute while you answer, and then I'll be back to chat.
Okay, hopefully you can still hear. So I'll start by saying that there are going to have to be trainings for the people that do different roles. So that's something that has slowed down this process, is the DEC has been developing the training for the different roles. So in answer to the question though, if there and so we will need to have a group of identified verifiers. And so if your organization is qualified to be a verifier, then yes, potentially you can be a verifier. Now,
Okay.
now there's a lot of stuff about this that raises questions about conflicts of interest. So, you
Yeah.
know, you shouldn't be judge and jury. It's just something that's complicating all this, because people want to know that things are being taken care of, and that the person who's saying that it's being taken care of isn't somehow biased. So there are going to be checks and balances. And so this is stuff that's still being sorted out. If you are the verifier to determine something is in the shape that it needs to, that's kind of a discrete thing. But if you were the partner organization and you are maintaining it, there are questions about whether or not you should be verifying it also, because the purpose of the verifier is to make sure that the maintainer is really doing what they're supposed to do. That's one of the reasons why this system has gotten complex, and it's still being sorted out, is what I would say. But I think the short answer to the question is that if we have to have things verified, if someone has been classified as being capable of doing the verification, then yeah, they could do it, and that could include your organization, but you may have to have gone to some training in order to do it.
Sorry,
Interesting.
I'm talking a
Okay.
lot.
Thank you. Yeah, I think, we already have sort of a lot of projects in motion like this, as I'm sure other watershed organization groups do. And the credits are not being counted, right? Because it's on private landowner property. But interesting approach. I'm interested to learn more. Thanks for your explanation, Dean.
Yeah, just quickly interject there. There are people who are having conversations about, how much of this stuff could or should happen consistently across all the basins. And so that if you're qualified in one basin, you're qualified in all basins. And I've heard some of these, some people have made the case for having application processes that are similar across all the basins, because if you're a statewide organization, you only want to have to learn one kind of thing. It isn't all, the dust isn't settled, but let's hope that it does soon.
Real quick question, maybe long answer. Dean, if the QUISP is adopting, wouldn't your staff be the ones to verify? I don't know. Maybe that's a conflict of interest. I don't know.
So yeah, I mean, that's how I thought of it initially, but I can tell you that in one version, I believe I've got this right, in one version of the guidance, there was language that said essentially that the clean water service provider could only be the verifier of last resort. And that, remember I talked about conflicts of interest earlier?
Yeah.
The thinking someone had was that it should be some other entity, because if I'm the QUISP and I am the verifier, I have perhaps a bias to verify things and say they're okay, because if I say they're not okay, I have to take those credits off. Remember, like I was saying earlier. So that's something that's still in the works. We've made the argument that the QUISP shouldn't have to have DEC's permission to be the verifier, but my expectation is that the verifier would be some other entity that is really good at verifying and can do it effectively and speedily.
Aaron?
Oh man, I have so many opinions about this. I'll keep them quick. I think it gets really complicated when you're proposing, or maybe propose that a separate entity outside of the organization that developed the project, that got funding for the riparian buffer planting, or that developed the river corridor easement, in our case, is not the verifier. I understand the conflict of interest there, but I can think of many landowners where we have a river corridor easement and are working on a riparian buffer planting or have one in place currently, that they'd be like, what? Like, who are you, Dean, if you're the verifier, or who are you, some other person on this, call that becomes a verifier? I think it just really complicates things, and landowners that we work with have entered into a river corridor easement and riparian buffer planting because they want to protect their land, they want to conserve their land, they want to do right for the town that they live in. But they don't want to be involved in, honestly, like politics, in state people coming in and saying, oh, this has not been maintained correctly because maybe that landowner cut down a tree because there's it's just like, it becomes this complicated mess. And I think we have to trust the people who establish the relationship to build that project out, that they are the experts in what they do, and they should be trusted to verify that their project is being operated and maintained in the way that they designed it to be. And then also, like, who pays for the person who is the verifier? Like, it sounds like there's money for that, but like, to develop the application, no matter how simple it is, like, are you going to pay VRC to then come to a QUISP and WIC meeting with 12 projects that we want you to adopt? And like, what is that? Is it just indirect? Is it, like, that? It's just, whoa, okay.
Okay, Aaron, thanks. Jed, I think you're next, and then Natalie.
Yeah, so Dean, just so I'm clear about these projects that might be adopted, those are within our basin, but they weren't necessarily initiated by the QUISP. So they could be initiated by somebody else, some other agency, but they're coming to you to get verified and to continue their maintenance. So that's all, really.
Yeah, if I can just quickly respond. So a long time ago, we talked about something called the Watershed Project Database. And in theory, that Watershed Project Database has every project that's been done. And you can go into that Watershed Project Database and say, show me the completed projects in the Lamoille Basin. So, and I've done that. I don't have it on my screen right now, but there's a list of different types of projects that were completed in the Lamoille Basin. And so, so that's one way this could be approached, is we start with that list and then we contact the people that did the project and say, hey, would you want that project to be adopted? What's happening to it right now? Would you be able to verify it, and so on? The process for bringing projects forward and getting them adopted is still being worked out, but we're not talking about projects that someone is doing right now. That's the short of it. We're looking backwards in time to things that are already done, where people weren't really thinking that someday maybe this will be QUISP adopted. I'll stop there.
Natalie?
Yeah, thanks for your explanation, Dean. My thought process was similarly aligned with Aaron's. My first question was, if it's a project that would require some verification and or maintenance that's requires sort of more of an engineering approach, not a tree planting, but some other project that has been submitted that, would require, say, an engineer, or we would have to contract out the verification. is that something that's included in the application? Because I'm wondering, who pays for that to have somebody other than our organization, for example, be the verifier? And then the other question that I had was if we're going into the Clean Water Project database and we're examining projects that had been done in years past, say a riparian buffer planting, and there isn't, a high survival rate of those trees, which happens occasionally, is the maintenance, would that maintenance involve a replanting, for example? I understand this is being sifted out still, but I think these are sort of bigger questions that need to be considered. So
Yeah, and if I can
it's just a
jump
lot to
in,
think through.
yeah, I think an approach that has been used in other DEC processes that have to do with regulations has been sort of related to adoption. Whoever has the project now and they're responsible for operations and maintenance, they're incurring some cost and they see a benefit to transferring it over to either transferring responsibility over to someone else or committing to doing it and getting money in exchange. We want to start from the premise that the practice is doing what it's supposed to. So if a tree planting was done and there's only 20% survival, you get to a point of saying, well, has the project failed? And would it be a new project? Maybe it's a great candidate to do a new project. And here, like Peter was saying earlier, here's some quick bucks. We call it a new project and it's in the system and it gets carried through that way, rather than having to say, oh, gee, you have to bring it to like 80% of the survival or 85%, just theoretical, before we would say, yes, it's doing what it was supposed to and it can be adoptable. At some point, the decision could be made that it makes more sense to start from scratch, call it a new project, and then take it over. I hope that's helpful.
Yeah. Jed, are you still? Adelaide, I believe you have another question. Response. Nope. You're muted. Adelaide, you're muted.
I'm still learning how to use Zoom 3 years later. If we're doing it in this basin, we should be doing it across all basins equally. I think that point was made earlier, and I just wanted to reiterate that. Thanks for making that point.
I also wanted to say that, I hear what Aaron is saying about the relationships the property owner has. Like, last thing you want is somebody, who are you, showing up? I want it to be simple. I want it to be effective. And there could very well be a way of setting this up so that the organization that did the project could verify the operation and maintenance work that someone else is doing. It's possible. I'm open to the possibilities, and I think this conversation has been really helpful, giving me food for thought as we are inching towards a time when we might actually be doing this. I don't know. Yeah, I'll leave it at that.
Okay, is there any more discussion regarding this topic, or do we want to move on?
I'll just say I'll continue to update folks on the status of this chapter. It does seem like, it's still evolving, but I know that the people who are working on it are trying to get it finalized and open for public comment and all that kind of thing. So we will at least know what the final guidance from DEC is.
Thanks, Dean. Yes, so any further comments or shall we move along? It sounds like we're moving along. Farm project refresher. Dean, you're muted. It's like a seance, you know?
Yeah, like Adelaide. I'm still
Dean, are you
learning.
out there?
Yeah, 3 years later, still learning.
Speak to us.
So yes, this is really more of a transmittal of information. There's been discussion of projects in farm settings since the early days. They kind of come into they become more frequent, and then they fade off and come back. And I know that in some basins, not necessarily in Lamoille, there have been some work going on that could result in projects that are on farms or in farm settings, and that gives rise to some of these questions. So I just thought I would share the information and run through it quickly just so that people had it. And if we can, people have questions that they want to follow up, they can. The packets had a brief note, and it had an email from someone from the Agency of Agriculture describing the process. I also provided a copy of the screening document. Everybody who's worked on an application thus far has seen it before, but you might not have focused on it. So there's that, and then there's a flow chart. There are even some other documents that I didn't burden you with, but can share. This flow chart is meant to help you understand when a project in a farm setting could qualify for the use of QUISP funds. And I don't want to drill down into the details of it over Zoom, but hopefully you can look at it. But basically, we have to find out first, is the project in a farm that's regulated, or is it really small, in which case it's non-regulated, and we can basically have much more flexibility. Or if it's in a regulated farm, then is it in a narrow band of projects that might actually be fundable using QUISP funds? So basically, if a project is not in the narrow band and it's in a farm setting, then it's not going to be something that we can fund using QUISP dollars. Now, what, like I said, I'm not going to drill down into this. We have had the screening forms. People have seen these kinds of things in the past. There is one screening form that is specific to agricultural projects. The version that I am told is still the current version, has this design implementation block grant heading. So even though we're talking about formula funds, they say this is the correct screening form. It's a lot like the form that you use when making doing the DEC screening, but it is something that will walk you through these steps, like I was just saying, basically to establish that something is not a regulated farm and it is in that narrow band of projects. What I wanted to, tie this up in a bow with is to say, like with almost all other types of project development, communication is key. So that means talking to the, staying in close contact with the landowner, staying in close contact with the agency professional staff whose realm you are working in. And in this case, it's being in communication with the Agency of Agriculture staff as early as you can, using these forms. And what I would say is really important is to start early. If you have a very attractive project in a farm setting, you don't want to invest time pursuing it, at least pursuing it using QUISP funds or in the hope of QUISP funds, if the Agency of Agriculture is going to say that it's not QUISP eligible. Now, I will use one example of how complicated this can be. QUISP funds, in theory, can be used for buffers that are beyond a default buffer that is one that's required in certain settings because of the ag practices requirements. So it is you can, but, and you can't go close to the stream. So what it's showing is that you're effectively talking about two different types of projects that would have to be done in the way that respects each other in order to make it work. So it's complicated. It's not impossible, but it's complicated. And then again, it's the sort of thing that if you think that this is really going to be worth your time to provide additional buffer, then just make absolutely sure that all of the ducks are in a row. Yeah, I think if people saw anything in the meeting packet that they had a question about, let me know, or we can follow up offline. But hopefully having those things in hand, if you are doing any work that might affect a farm property, is gonna help you. I'll stop there.
So I guess, hold on. I wanted to, I just give you a little bit more, a more positive spin on this. I think that, you know, if it is a natural resource restoration project, there are a lot of questions in those forms you don't have to answer. So we'll get more. We're going to have a meeting actually with the QUISPs. What is it, tomorrow, Dean, on exactly what an eligible farm project is. And I think that information maybe can be directed to you in a way that makes this process easier. So if it's, you know, if you're just doing like floodplain restoration, wetland restoration, you basically, it's not going to be an issue. And it's just a matter of checking a few boxes and sending it to Nina and getting an okay without a fear of having somebody slap your hand. With the buffers, I think Nina has said that there are just a couple of questions she might ask. So it may be easier than it looks in some situations, like Dean said, and others it may be difficult, but there may be some easy situations to say, characterize and say, if you've got this situation, no problem. I think the area where I'd really like to investigate, and especially with you all who know farms, is on-farm projects. So if you've got this farm that's pretty small, a horse, couple horses, and you know they have to do some sort of stormwater management with their barn feature, then those could be really good projects because you can get a lot of phosphorus reduction from managing stormwater off of, you know, a barnyard area. So I think we've got to do some more looking and developing maybe fact sheets to make it easier for people.
If I can jump in, yeah, Peter, I hope I didn't sound overly pessimistic, but like I said in my comments, this is something that has been discussed since early days, and the forms haven't changed, and the forms, and we may hear tomorrow, you know, very clear explanations of what's in and what's out, but the forms to date really do leave things open to determination, which may or may not tell you why something was considered out. So that's my caution in this is really just related to the fact that it is still somewhat ambiguous, and maybe the meeting tomorrow, and we've had a couple of these with Nina Gage from Agency of Agriculture before, maybe this will be the one where the veil of ignorance is lifted off my head, and it will all seem much easier than it has been so far.
Chad?
Yeah, I thought I sort of had an idea about what a jurisdictional farm is, but when Karen said, you know, a couple horses, and so I was like, well, is that a jurisdictional farm? And what is it then? I'm not sure I know.
Less than 4 animal units is what you were alluding to, right, Karen?
Yeah, well, I don't know the numbers, but yeah, it's definitely defined by animal units or I think a crop, acres of crop.
I think, Jed, it's something like less than 4 horses, less than 40 chickens or ducks, or yeah, there's a whole series of guidelines. And so I think maybe rather than calling it a farm, call it a homestead. It's very small level activity. And then it's not regulated. And then it means it could be used for QIS funds. And I think, for some of us, it's like driving around the countryside and seeing something. It's really more like a rural homestead.
Okay, thank you.
I think the easiest way would just start the conversation with the Agency of Ag, like Karen, you mentioned earlier, like a farm runoff stormwater project, right? There may be a BMP funds through the Agency of Ag on that too. So like if you just start with them and then bring that conversation in with the DEC and then go from there. Regardless of size of farm or whatever, just identify and just ask the key people in those organizations and then move on one way or the other.
I'm ready to take you to the
Getting
finish
close
line.
here, 10:53, so let's go on.
Yeah, and I also did want to mention that there have been some comments in the comment box, and I have not been bringing those to attention. So Aaron had asked if there's an alternate, and I will follow up with her on that. I can't recall if there is an alternate. Ken signed off. Mel is the youngest book member. Okay, the screening tool link, someone has shared that. Okay. I don't know that there's anything more that won't be captured. Zoom does save the chat, so that is something that is available as a public record. So yes, wrapping up here, one of the only remaining topics for me to mention is the Clean Water Summit. DEC announced its desire to hold a meeting of what it's calling the Clean Water Network. The Clean Water Network. And the details on that, which I think you all have seen, or most of you have seen because you were part of a mailing asking people to respond to a survey that was done. But it's been decided that it will happen on Friday, April 5th. It's going to start in the morning, I think around 9 o'clock, and run until I believe about 3. It's an in-person meeting, and it will be in Waterbury. The agenda hasn't been finalized. I have seen a few different versions, but I am pretty sure what one item on the agenda is going to be a kind of rapid fire reporting, maybe up to 10 minutes from each basin on the things going on in that basin and how they were, how it's been, where you see things going. And that's something that I will be working with Peter and Sarah on. As far as charge, there's no charge. If travel to the meeting is something that may prove a barrier, the cost of it, then talk with me and we will see about compensating you for mileage for driving. Of course, we would encourage people to use carpools. We're not thinking about renting a van or anything, but if I heard from enough of you, well, then maybe that would be a possibility. I just don't know. It would be a long van trip potentially. And if there are no questions about that, then I think we're pretty much at the end.
Okay.
Now, I apologize.
Yep.
The agenda had it shown prominently. The webpage has the dates on it, but the next round for funding applications is going to open up soon on February 7th. The deadline is March 14. The one after that happens in April. People may remember that the most recent round 3, we didn't have any applications, although we knew that there were some that were close. And so I am expecting that we will have a good round of applications this time. Applications in other basins have been looking good lately, so I am optimistic that we will see a pretty robust set of applications this time around. That was the really truly the last thing I wanted to say.
Okay, yep, you will be seeing some applications for sure. At least from us. Let's see. So yeah, we're done. Do I hear a motion to adjourn the meeting?
I
So
motion
moved.
to adjourn.
All right, so Richard, and I'll take Jed as a second.
Okay.
All in favor of adjourning the meeting, say aye.
Aye.
All opposed? All right, the ayes have it. Have a good day,
Thanks all.
everyone.
Thank you.
Great discussion.